Good morning. I'm going to change my remarks a little bit after listening to this morning's discussion, but I do want to start by thanking you. I've got a long history with Kentucky. I used to be the executive director of what's called the National Association of Development Organizations, or NACo, that represent your area development districts. And Kentucky was always our strongest membership, so I've known many of you for many years before I joined NACo. But I do want to thank you for being 100% state. It was great to have 61 new member counties join NACo last year. It's an honor to have the judge as our new executive committee member. And one of the things that we were actually proud to do with NACo and Brian Roy, who's just a great leader, is to extend the program called the NACo Flag Etiquette Program, or the Flag Box Program, where we put one flag disposal box in each county, which is a big deal considering we just celebrated Veterans Day. I actually just did an event with my son who's in Boy Scouts, and it was just great to see the kids learn about the importance of the flag, and it's just a little token of our appreciation and partnership with NACo. I also want to recognize our board members from Kentucky, David Nicholson, who I think is right here, and is ending his term as your president, and he's also on the leadership of our Justice Public Safety Committee. Amy Milliken is a county attorney from Warren County, is now on our board. And Sheriff Aubrey from Jefferson County also represents all of the national sheriffs on our board of directors. And Michael will be joining our board soon. So what we really want to do is encourage you to get involved. Just like NACo is your voice at the state level, we are your voice at the national level. I like to remind folks that we are political, but we are not partisan. Our job is to represent 40,000 county elected officials across the country and the 3.6 million county employees that work for county government across America. It's pretty amazing to think that 1% of Americans actually work for county government, and yet we're probably the most misunderstood and least understood level of government in the country. And when you start educating folks about the role that we play, they always say, oh, I thought the city did that, or I thought the state did it. And in reality, it's those of you in this room and your colleagues that are really delivering incredible services. I'll get to transportation in a minute, but it's really important at the outset to really talk about the role that counties play in transportation. Nationally, we own 45% of the roads and 40% of all the bridges. Counties own 240,000 bridges across this country and a third of the airports and over 70% of the transit systems. And when we talk about federal state investments, we definitely want to be a partner in that. But before I get into the policy, just let me talk a little bit about the political environment in DC. You probably have election fatigue. There was a new study that just came out called The Hidden Tribes of America, and it kind of breaks down Americans into 7 different tribes, if you will. And the term that was best in that study, I thought, was the 85% of Americans that are part of what's called the exhausted majority. They're just tired of politics. But we really don't have that luxury in county government since we have to work with federal state partners, and obviously most of you are elected in this room. But what's interesting that came out of the recent election, and it was true leading up to the election and it's true today, is that one of the challenges is that both parties think they won. Both parties think they're winning. And yet the fastest group of voter registration is independent. It's kind of an interesting dynamic. So the 15% of the Americans who make up the hardcore of the left and the hardcore of the right think they're winning, and 85% of the Americans think nobody is winning. So it's created this roller coaster of election results in the last 10 years, with the House and Senate and the presidency switching parties every 2 years. On the Republican side, they had a huge case that the national economy is strong. You saw your own Senator McConnell, with a laser-like focus on federal judicial appointments, including the Supreme Court. They've been rolling back the Obama-era regulations at a record pace, and they've been focusing on trade and immigration, which really helped the Republicans retain the rural base. The rural base stayed with the Republican Party in a big way. On the Democratic side, you saw a huge wave with the Me Too movement and women coming into office. The U.S. Congress will now have over 135 women in Congress. a record number. It has spiked tremendously in the last 20 years, largely driven by higher wealth, income, suburban gains, and the result is the Democrats retook the House and will really be focusing on investigations. As we've talked to the Democratic leadership in the last couple of weeks, we've said you better be careful. Every time a party comes in and over-investigates, it backfires. See Bill Clinton impeachment. What the Democrats actually, the news is talking about their gains at the federal level, but what they're most excited about nationally is the wins at the state houses with the governors and the state legislatures, picking up over 300 seats in the legislature, which is really key for the 2020 redistricting. That is the big game for who will control the U.S. House into the future, are those decisions made at the state level with redistricting. And that is really how the Republicans held the House for the last couple of cycles, was what they did in the 2000 redistricting in 2010. So definitely interesting times with the Senate now having at least 51 Republicans and the Democrats having at least about 230 Democrats, so they both have control. We're still waiting for Georgia and Florida, and there will be a special election in Mississippi for the U.S. Senate, and so it's been very interesting. What was telling is there was a lot of discussion in the media about, was this a big wave or not? Was it a blue wave? And I would argue it was a slow, uneven wave. The Democrats did not win a single U.S. House Republican seat where President Trump got over 55% of the vote. So if you are a hardcore President Trump district or county, you stayed with him 100% of the time. We even saw the Democrats lose 2 seats in rural Minnesota, and they failed to flip 2 House Republican seats, one in California and one in New York, where the 2 Republican incumbents are actually under federal indictment. They still won re-election under indictment. And one of them from my home state in New York, he will be convicted. The FBI has him on tape doing insider trading, actually from the White House grounds. That was part of the ad, and he still won re-election. So it'll be interesting to see. I think Kentucky was a great example of how this played out nationally with Congressman Yarmouth in Kentucky 3. He is in what's called a D+6 seat, which means it leans to the Democratic side by +6. He won 62% of the vote versus Congressman Andy Barr in this region, who's got what's called an R+9 seat. He slipped by with 51% of the vote. And his opponent was pretty typical of the type of candidates that the House Democrats ran, with Amy McGrath, obviously a Marine, fighter pilot, 89 combat missions, and that's the type of candidate that the Democrats put forward. But they couldn't overcome redistricting for a bigger wave. When you look at the state legislative control nationally, there's one statistic that really jumps out. Out of all 50 states, there is only one state legislature left in the country that has divided control between their House and their Senate. Minnesota is the only state legislature left in the country that has divided control of 2 parties in their House and their Senate. Every other state in the union either has both chambers controlled by the Republicans or both chambers controlled by the Democrats. Wow. The first time since 1914. So it just shows you how we continue to be a divided nation. And just a couple of quick minutes to wrap up. Despite what the media shows, what I call the reality TV of what's happening inside DC, there is a great deal of policy debates going on and movement on county issues. Last year we had federal tax reform. There was a 2-year budget deal. We had a Supreme Court ruling on what's called the Marketplace Fairness Act, which allows state and locals to collect online sales tax for existing taxes. The Congress just passed a major opioid bill that I think you'll be discussing on your agenda. They passed an aviation bill along with some major reforms for FEMA's pre-disaster mitigation program, all of which has an impact on county government. Now they're trying to wrap up the budget cycle. We're trying to finish the bill for what's called the Water Resources Bill. Those are U.S. Army Corps of Engineer projects. Hopefully that bill will be done here soon, and that obviously has a big impact on counties and your economic development and your waterways. They're trying to wrap up the Farm Bill right now, which really is now the Nutrition Bill. 85% of the Farm Bill goes to the nutrition title or the food stamp program. And then you're going to see a lot of conversation in the next couple of weeks around federal criminal justice reform driven by Jared Kushner in the White House and others. So as you move into your transportation conversation, I just want to say a couple things as I wrap up. The president put forward a $1.5 trillion plan, as you heard talked about earlier. What I would caution you is to understand the difference between funding and financing. There's a big difference when you drill down into these proposals about what are they giving you the authority to borrow versus what are they generating in revenue for funding. There's a lot of conversation about a gas tax. What we saw in California this year is the legislature and the governor approved a new 12-cent gas tax and a 20-cent diesel tax. And one party used it as a get out the vote to repeal it. But one of the things that we've discovered when it comes to infrastructure is the disconnect between how much residents are actually paying and what the political perception is and the political pain for raising those taxes. So Kentucky is 34th in the nation in combined state, local, and federal gas taxes. I believe it's around 34 cents combined. So if you drove 15,000 miles a year, you had a 20-mile-a-gallon vehicle, you purchase about 750 gallons of fuel a year. That equates to about $27 a month in federal, state, and local taxes to use all your roads and bridges. By comparison, the average American spends about $161 a month on cable and about $80 a month for their cell phone. Personally, I would love to know those Americans that only spend $160 a month on cable, internet, and phone. It's certainly not where I live. But it's priorities. Going back to where I live, we have a fee that we pay on our cable bill to watch the Washington Nationals baseball team. It's a $15 a month fee. So I pay $7 a month more to all my roads and bridges versus paying Comcast to watch the Washington Nationals. My point is, whether you love baseball or not, is we have to put into context, do we value our transportation system or not? When you move from a gas tax or a vehicle miles traveled into financing, you will find the user pays more because you're moving to a profit-driven system for the private sector. Not for or against it. Actually, NACo supports P3s. But we have to have honest discussions about how much is the gas tax actually costing versus what are some of these new mechanisms. And so with that, I would like to just thank you. I encourage you to get involved. We're really excited to have Judge Moore in our leadership. We have a great partnership with NACo. Brian Roy and the team do a fabulous job, incredibly responsive. We work together on advocacy, on business development programs, on training. We're excited tomorrow that there'll be an announcement related to the opioid and substance abuse crisis that's plagued the country, how NACo, and the Appalachian Regional Commission will work together. I'll let Tim Thomas talk about that. And I'd just like to end by saying I'm really disappointed that I have to leave today. I saw there's a $1,000 door prize for whoever stays to the end tomorrow. And I had worked the system a little bit. So just not going to be able to execute. I'll have to stay next year. But want to thank you. Yeah. Judge?
Matt, we've got a couple extra minutes. Tell us a little bit about Clark County National Convention coming up July 10th through 14th. We have a lot of people, I think, that are really looking at going to Clark County, Nevada. We won't say Las Vegas. We'll say Clark County. But tell us a little bit about the convention.
Well, our annual conference will be July 12th to 15th in Clark County. And as Judge Moore was saying, you are not lying to the media when you say you're going to Clark County. When Las Vegas was developed, the old Strip is in the city, but the city didn't want to expand into tourism and gambling. So the Strip and most of what you view as Vegas is actually in the unincorporated parts of Clark County. The city is only 300,000 people. The county is 2 million. So if they ask you where you're going, you are definitely going to Clark County. You don't have to step foot in incorporated Vegas. But we will have a lot of conversations about economic development, about things like our Stepping Up initiative, which is related to mental health in jails. There will be a lot of sessions. I think that'll be very relevant and consistent with what you're doing here.
Thank you.
So thank you again.